Hey, what's up, guys? This is Benny Ricciardi with rotocurve.com, and I'm here with our DraftKings, FanDuel, MLB, Benny's Bats video for Wednesday, July 27th. It's a 9-game night slate that we're going to be talking about, and I'm going to be honest with you guys. It's actually kind of a tough slate. The reason for that is we got a lot of really good pitchers on the mound, meaning there's not a lot of great spots for the bats. And I think the way to differentiate yourself tonight is going to be by nailing the pitching. I mean, there are, as you'll see here, and as you see if you read Josh Kalachi's on the bump article, there's quite a few guys that make a lot of sense here. And because of that, there's also not a lot of bats that we really want to take against them. So I think you're going to get some high ownership on some of these bats today. And I think the real way to kind of differentiate yourself is going to be pitching. So let's get into it, and you guys will see what I'm talking about. What we like to do here in the Benny's Bat section is we take a look at each pitcher that's on the mound, try to figure out what their weaknesses are, and then figure out which bats on the other team profile to do the best against them. So the first game we're going to talk about is Colorado at Baltimore. Now, I don't really agree with the Vegas line on this game. They have John Gray as an underdog here on the road, but I really like this kid. I mean, he's been better on the road, as are most pitchers who probably have Coors Field as their home park. But Gray profiles as the kind of guy we love for daily fantasy. He has a pretty good strikeout numbers. He gets a ton of ground balls, doesn't give up a lot of fly balls, which is good against this Baltimore team that has a lot of home run hitters. We know this Baltimore team does have the ability to strike out. They do strike out a lot, even though they also put up a lot of runs when they do wind up getting hits. Right-handed bats are actually doing a little bit better against Gray. He's been really tough on lefties this year. They're only hitting .214 against them, so probably not looking at a guy like Chris Davis here. Probably not looking at any of the switch hitters like, maybe a Matt Wieters. Right-handed bats are hitting .242 against them, which, again, isn't really great, but, that's probably the way to attack them. Machado, very good in righty-on-righty matchups, 384 WOBA, 237 ISO. Jonathan Scope, 371 WOBA, 240 ISO. You got guys like Adam Jones and Trumbo who are going to be up towards the top of the order. A couple other right-handed bats there. But honestly, I mean, I kind of like John Gray in this matchup. I don't really love this Baltimore offense, so I don't know how much exposure I'm going to have to a lot of these Baltimore bats here. The other side of this game for Baltimore, you got the young Dylan Bundy pitching. He's a guy that's a big prospect, kind of a converted relief pitcher, so I can't see him going more than maybe 5 or 6 innings in this game. It's probably going to be a little bit more of a bullpen game here. Left-handed bats are hitting .293 against him. Right-handed bats are hitting .310 against him this year. He has a huge fly ball rate, so there's a good chance he could give up some home runs here. So I like some of these Colorado bats. I mean, a guy like Cargo, 411 WOBA, 289 ISO, hits very well against right-handed pitching. Good home run hitters park down there in Camden Yards. You can look at a guy like Nolan Arenado, 389 WOBA, 308 ISO. Another guy very good in righty-on-righty matchups, has a lot of power, can take Bundy yard. And then after that, I mean, Charlie Blackmon's been underperforming a little bit lately. Still kind of expensive on most sites. 360 WOBA, 179 ISO for him. I don't like him as much this year because last year he was stealing bases for us. So he hit home runs, he was leading off, and he was stealing bases. So there were a lot of ways that he was scoring his fantasy points. He's really not doing that this year. So if I'm looking at Rockies, I think Cargo and Arenado are the two guys that I kind of want to make sure I have some exposure to. The next game, we got Seattle against Pittsburgh. Another pretty solid pitching matchup here. Gerrit Cole on the mound for Pittsburgh. Very tough on right-handed bats. High ground ball rate for him. Left-handed bats have been the way to go after him. They're hitting .321 against them this year. But again, high ground ball rate, low home run rate for Cole. You're looking at the Seattle team. I mean, Robinson Cano makes some sense. He's a guy that can rack up some hits for us. 376 WOBA, 215 ISO. Maybe looking at a guy like Kyle Seager. He's been hot, 5 for his last 11 with a couple home runs. Those are probably the two guys I'd look to attack Cole with. Cole's been pitching much better lately than he did earlier in the year. But again, he does struggle with the left-handed bats, and Seattle's got a lot of lefties to throw at him. I mean, you're going to see like, Aoki and Seth Smith up towards the top of the order. You got guys like Cano and Seager, who we discussed, maybe even an Adam Lind as well. I don't think it's a very soft spot here for Cole, but I do think he's going to be okay here. And like I said, I mean, it's a tough night, so I think some of these Seattle bats make some sense and may find their way into my lineup. The other side of this game, we got the lefty James Paxton, and he's coming off a big strikeout game. He gets a lot of ground balls. He's getting a park bump here. As good a park as Seattle is, Pittsburgh might even be a little bit better of a pitcher's park. This Pittsburgh offense has kind of been struggling. As far as bats go, I mean, Starling Marte has been pretty hot. He's got double-digit DraftKings points in 5 of his last 10 games. Right-handed bat that hits left-handed pitching pretty well. And then after that, you're looking at other guys that hit lefties well. McCutcheon normally does, but he's really struggling here, although he is cheap if you want to go that route. Cervelli does hit left-handed pitching well, so I think he's a viable option at catcher today. 364 WOBA versus left-handed pitching for him, so he's somebody that makes some sense. I know people are going to talk about Jordy Mercer. I never really play him, but he does hit lefties well, so I guess he's somebody else you could consider. Probably only going to even consider him if he's hitting in the leadoff spot or in the 2-hole. Like I said, there's just not a lot of upside there with Mercer for me. Next game, we got St. Louis Cardinals at the New York Mets. Adam Wainwright on the mound for the Cardinals, and he's thrown up quality starts now, gone at least 6 innings, given up 3 runs or less in 8 of his last 9 games. So, I think he's back. Earlier in the season he struggled, but he looks really, really good lately. The Mets lineup is kind of struggling as well. I guess Cespedes is probably your favorite bat here. Righty on righty, does pretty good, has some decent numbers, but I'm not really looking to pick on Wainwright. If you want to pick on him with the lefties, you got guys like Granderson and Conforto who make a little bit of sense. But again, I don't really love it. Wainwright's been putting up pretty good numbers lately, and he's likely to get the win. My only problem with Wainwright today is he's a little pricey on both of the sites. I think he's over 11K on DraftKings. On FanDuel, I think he's 9,200 if I'm not mistaken. I think he's almost 11K on DraftKings, 9,200 on FanDuel. I think I like him a little bit more on FanDuel than I do on DraftKings. But again, he's been putting up 20, 30 DraftKings points in his last 4 or 5 starts. So he's somebody that you at least got to consider on the mound. On the other side of this game, Logan Barrett pitching for the Mets. Left-handed bats hitting 258 against them, but not a lot of home run power. The right-handers are hitting 273 with 7 home runs in 33 innings. So a little bit of a reverse splits action going on. He does have a low fly ball rate. So, again, not a guy who you're expecting to give up a ton of home runs, but you know what? This Cardinals team is not really hitting a ton of home runs either. They got Aledmus Diaz is probably the best bat here. 386 WOBA, 216 ISO. I was shocked to see that he's over $5,000 on DraftKings, so I don't think I can play him on DraftKings today. He's a little bit cheaper, as are most of these Cardinals bats on FanDuel. On FanDuel, a lot of these bats are a little bit cheaper, so I think the Cardinals are more in play on FanDuel than they are over on DraftKings. All the outfielders are pretty cheap on FanDuel. They're all over 4K on DraftKings, so, the one outfielder I like the most is probably Randall Grichuk. 358 WOBA, 266 ISO for him. Hits very well in righty-on-righty matchups. So Grichuk definitely somebody I want some exposure to. Like I said, on FanDuel, I think you can stack these cards up. On DraftKings, it's kind of expensive to stack up the Cardinals. And again, they're playing in Citi Field, not really the greatest hitter's ballpark. I think they can get to Barrett here. I do think Wainwright gets the win and shuts down the Mets. But I don't think this is going to be the highest scoring game on the day. Next game we have is the Battle of Chicago, the White Sox against the Cubs. Anthony Renato, I think is his name. Relief pitcher stretching out today. It's probably going to be a bullpen game for the White Sox. Maybe you get 4 or 5 innings out of Renato, and then you're probably going to see, 2 or 3 different relievers come in there. Left-handed bat's the way you really want to go after him. So I think Anthony Rizzo in a great spot, 400 WOBA, 275 ISO, just huge upside for this guy and against right-handed pitching. Chris Bryant smashes right-handed pitching as well, 375 WOBA, 222 ISO for him, so he's in play. And then Wilson Contreras, the catching option, still really, really cheap. I think he's right around $3,000 on FanDuel. I think he's below 4K on DraftKings as well today. If this guy's going to keep hitting 4th or 5th in this order, he's got all these big bats in front of him. I still think he's a viable option. I still think he's somebody we got to consider whenever they roll him out there. On the other side of this game, we got Jason Hamill. Right-handed bats have really struggled against him this year. They're hitting below 200, so not looking at any of the righties on the White Sox. Left-handed bats hitting 255 against them, 8 home runs in 55 innings, so about 1 every 5.5 innings. Really you want to look at the left-handed bats. So a guy like Adam Eaton, 354 WOBA, again, not a ton of upside, hasn't been stealing bases, doesn't have home run power, but he can rack up a couple hits, score some runs for us. Melky Cabrera has been hot. He's got a hit streak, double-digit games. He's got a hit streak going right now. He's batting cleanup in the middle of that order, switch hitter, batting from the left side. I think he makes some sense. And then one of the other guys I'd look at, Tim Anderson, the shortstop, up at the top of that order. Anderson is 2,200 on FanDuel, so min price, and he's 3,400 on DK, so not min price, but pretty cheap. He can steal some bases for you. He has that stolen base upside. He does have a little bit of pop in his bat, can get some hits. I just think the price is really, really cheap here today. So if you need a cheap option, I don't hate Tim Anderson as somebody to throw in there. Next game I want to talk about, we got Oakland at Texas. Again, Yu Darvish on the mound, another very good pitcher. Darvish is fifth or sixth start, I think, after coming off the DL. He's probably still on a pitch count. I can't see him going more than maybe 90, 95 pitches here. So he's probably only going to get you about 6 innings. He's been doing this in every one of the starts, and he's been dominating. He's been going an average of 5 innings pitched, giving up only about 2 runs and striking out about 8 batters. So I'm not really looking to take any Oakland bats against him. I think he's a little pricey over on DraftKings for a guy who's probably only going to go 6 innings. But again, he's only been going 6 innings in all these other starts, and he's been putting up 25, 30 fantasy points over on DraftKings. I like him a little more on FanDuel. I do think he gets the win. Again, the price is a little bit cheaper, 9,200. I think it's a little more reasonable. I love Darvish. My only drawback is that he's not going to go deep in this game, and I'm really not looking at any of the Oakland bats against him. Other side of this game, we got Sean Manaea, the rookie who they called up, left-handed pitcher. It's been lights out the left-handed bat, so I don't think you can really look at any of these lefties on Texas. They're all kind of out of play for me. Right-handed bats have knocked them around, though. 279 batting average, 9 home runs in 63 innings. So Adrian Beltre, 391 WOBA, 226 ISO, think he's in play. I really like Ian Desmond, 371 WOBA, 194 ISO, has a huge bounce-back season this year. He's been smashing home runs. His batting average is over 300. I mean, he looks really, really good this year. So Desmond, I wouldn't mind having some exposure to. And then you can look at some of these other guys if they get in the lineup. If Chirinos gets in the lineup, there's a guy, 361 WOBA, 253 ISO score, a cheap catching option that has the home run power. I think he's in play. Maybe you can look at a Jurickson Profar who'll be batting from the right side in this game. Some of those guys I think make sense. I want to look at the right-handed bats. Definitely stay away from the lefties. Next game we talk about Arizona at Milwaukee. Jimmy Nelson on the mound for Milwaukee. Left-handed bats last year hit 300 against them. He's been better against them this year average-wise, but he's giving up a ton of home runs to left-handed bats. That's really the way you want to attack him. He's usually tougher on right-handed bats than he has been this year. Right-handed bats have actually hit him pretty well this year. But like I said, lefties are the way you want to go. Now, here's the problem I have. You look at this Arizona team, there's not a lot of lefties here. Jake Lamb would be the guy that would stand out to me the most, but Jake Lamb is actually a game-time decision, banged up a little bit, may not be in the lineup today. If he's in the lineup, I love him. If he's not in the lineup, though, or if he's not 100%, obviously I don't think we can play him. They're already without Chris Herman, who's the left-handed hitting platoon of the catcher split that they had. So, really their damage is basically like Michael Bourne being the only left-handed bat in that lineup. And, Bourne is an okay option. He's not really somebody that I love, but, he could be somebody that you could look at here today. And then obviously, Paul Goldschmidt always in play, even in righty-on-righty matchups. I know Nelson has been tougher on righties in the past, although this year righties have been hitting him. 390 WOBA, 200-plus ISO score for Goldie. So, he's obviously somebody else you always got to consider. The other side of this game, we got Archie Bradley pitching. Again, another guy tough on right-handed bats. They're only hitting 203 against him this year. Left-handed bats are hitting 295, though, with 6 home runs in 33 innings. You look at this Milwaukee team, though, and, the guys you're scared of are the right-handed bats. So from the left side, Villar's a switch hitter. He's okay. Much better against left-handed pitching from the right side. Scooter Gennett is obviously in a pretty good spot. He homered in the last game. Real good left-handed bat against right-handed pitching. After that, though, there's really not much. Ryan Braun, 359 WOBA, 200 ISO in righty-on-righty matchups. The reason I kind of like Braun a little bit is he's been running a lot lately, getting you those stolen bases. So he's a guy that does get on base a lot, and if he gets on base and steals and scores a couple runs, he can get you a nice fantasy score here. And this entire Milwaukee team, to be honest, has been trying to steal a lot of bases lately. So that's the one thing I do think saves them here. But again, I don't really think they profile well, being that they're a righty-dominant lineup, and you really want to use left-handers against them. Next game we can talk about Atlanta against Minnesota. I feel like there should be some runs in this game, but it's not. Nothing's really like jumping out at me. Mike Foltynewicz is on the mound for Atlanta. Left-handed bats killed him in 2015. In 2016, the average is a little lower, but he does have a big fly ball rate, has given up 7 home runs to lefties in 25 innings. So I think this is a great spot for a guy like Max Kepler, who a lot of people never play. 340 WOBA, 281 ISO against right-handed pitching. huge ISO score at 281, and going up against a guy that's given up 7 home runs in 25 innings, or about one every 3.5 innings. I think Kepler's in a pretty good spot here today, and he always goes low owned. Outside of him, though, there's not a lot of left-handed bats I really like on this team. I mean, you want to use guys like Rosario or Joe Mauer. I mean, be my guest. They don't have enough upside for me. The only other guy I'd kind of consider is Miguel Sano. Righty on righty, 361 WOBA, 236 ISO, has a lot of power. But again, Folty's been tough on the righties. The lefties is really the way you want to try to attack them. The other side of this game, we got Tyler Duffy on the mound. He's given up 4 or more runs in 8 of his last 10 starts, so I definitely think we can take some bats against them. Left-handed bats are hitting 270 against them, but not a lot of home runs, only 4 in 44 innings. Right-handed bats have actually been a way to attack them. They have a 319 average and 11 home runs in 44 innings, so about 1 every 4 innings. There aren't really any big right-handed bats on this Braves team, so I'm probably not going to be using any of the righties. Freddie Freeman, obviously the one guy that stands out the most, 369 WOBA, 235 ISO. His numbers are really weird this year. I think he has like 15 or 16 home runs and like 40 RBIs, which is just insane because nobody's getting on base in front of this guy. You almost kind of feel bad for him, and you hope that at some point they figure it out. I guess you can look at the other lefties, guys like Markakis, Jace Peterson if he's leading off, Ender Inciarte if he's up towards the top of the order. But again, not a lot of upside with any of these guys, not really guys that I love. But on a slate that's kind of tough like this, I think some of them are at least worth considering. The next game, New York Yankees against the Houston Astros. Masahiro Tanaka on the mound for the Yankees. 230 batting average for him, basically to left and right-handed bats, so he's pretty even. He does give up some solo home runs every now and then, has a low walk rate, does get a couple strikeouts, is in a pretty good matchup here against this Houston team. Righty on righty, this Houston team is not all that good. Altuve and Springer are much better against lefties. Correa is actually the best bat they have in righty on righty situations. And even he is only around like a 360 WOBA. It's not like he crushes in righty on righty situations. One other guy I'd look at, Luis Valbuena. He's been hot lately. He's a lefty and he has power. They've moved him up in the order. And he's one of those guys as a one-off that I think you can look at because I think he could be one of those guys that could get a hold of one of Tanaka's pitches and take him yard. But again, Tanaka's been so good this year, I'm not looking to stack up these Astro bats at all. If I do anything, it might be like a Correa or a Valbuena as a one-off kind of play. On the other side of this game, we got Lance McCullers, and I love Lance McCullers. Lance McCullers has only given up 2 home runs in 70 innings pitched this year. He has a high strikeout rate, high ground ball rate, exactly what we look for in our fantasy pitchers. Low home runs allowed. He's very tough on right-handed batters. Left-handed batters this year have actually done a lot better than him than they have in the past. Last year, he was much tougher on lefties than he is this year. This year, lefties are hitting 280 against them. Now, the Yankees do have a lot of left-handed bats, which would kind of say that they profile well against McCullers, but it is a little bit of a small sample size, so I don't think that McCullers is going to keep allowing left-handed bats to hit 280 against them this year. And honestly, this Yankee offense just doesn't have a lot of upside for me. Like I said, they are going to throw a lot of lefties at him. You got Ellsbury and Gardner lefties at the top of the order. You got Beltran, the switch hitter, Brian McCann. So you got 4 lefties up there in the top 4 or 5 in the order. You got guys like Teixeira, Didi, Gregorius, other left-handed bats that are in here. So I don't think it's a slam dunk easy kind of spot for McCullers, but again, McCullers has high strikeout numbers. He doesn't give up a lot of runs. He keeps the ball in the ballpark and almost never gives up home runs. So I could see him still putting up a big game. I don't love this game as much if you're playing on FanDuel because I think it could go either way. So it's tough to take either Tanaka or McCullers. But over on DraftKings, I think I like McCullers a little more than Tanaka because I think McCullers has a little more of the strikeout upside. Last game we have Los Angeles Angels against the Kansas City Royals. Matt Shoemaker is on the mound, and he has been one of the best pitchers in the league since June 1st. Listen to the average for his last 10 starts. In his last 10 starts, he's averaging 7 innings pitched, 7 strikeouts, only giving up 6 hits, 1 walk, and 2 runs. So he's basically got an ERA just above 2, a whip of right around 1, and he's getting you a strikeout per inning while going at least 7 innings in most of these games. He is a high fly ball pitcher. That is the drawback with him. But you know what? In Kansas City, a park that fly balls don't really fly out of home run wise, I don't really think it hurts him all that much. So I like Shoemaker here. I think he's in a pretty decent spot. Even though he's a right-hander, right-handed bats have hit him for a higher average and shown more power. Sal Perez is somebody that I definitely am interested in at the catcher spot. Righty on righty for Sal Perez, but he's 6 of 8 lifetime against Shoemaker with a home run. So those are some pretty solid numbers for a small sample size. Definitely something I'm interested in. Eric Hosmer, probably the best bat profile-wise, 367 WOBA, 170 ISO, and he too is 4 for 8 against Shoemaker lifetime. So if I'm taking anybody on Kansas City, those are going to be the two guys. But like I said, Shoemaker has been legitimately like a top 5 pitcher in the league over the course of the last 2 months. So, targeting against him hasn't really worked out all that well. The other side of this game, another guy who's been pitching really well lately, Danny Duffy for Kansas City. Left-handed pitcher, very tough on left-handed bats. If you're going to do anything, you want righties, but even righties are only hitting about 234 against them this year. They do have 12 home runs in 76 innings pitched, and he does have a high fly ball rate and a high home run percentage. So, excuse me, I think you want to look at some of those guys that have some home run upside. Really, the one that stands out the most is Mike Trout. 414 WOBA, 249 ISO against left-handed pitching. You got to love Mike Trout. I mean, he's the best player in baseball, in my opinion. Other than that, I'm not really thrilled with the other guys. Like, I don't think I'm going to have any Pujols exposure today. We don't know who's going to be in there. Marte, Crone, all these guys that they've been rolling in and out of the lineup. Daniel Nava. None of them are really jumping off the page at me. Escobar actually has close to a 370 WOBA, and he'll be leading off for this Angels team. So I don't mind him either as a cheap shortstop option. But as far as bats goes, that's about it. So as you can see, I mean, we talked about a lot of good pitchers and really only like a couple guys here and there, like a one-off here or a one-off there. I don't think there's going to be a lot of runs scored tonight. And I think that a lot of the runs scored are going to be from some of these weak pitchers that are in pretty obvious spots. So I think the ownership on these guys is going to be pretty high. Like I said, what it really comes down to is picking the right pitchers tonight. If you get the guys that put up 25 to 35 fantasy points each, and you get 2 of them in your lineup on DraftKings as your SP1 and SP2, or if you get one of those guys that's a little bit cheaper that puts up the same 40 to 50 fantasy points that some of the higher end options do on FanDuel, I think that's really the way that you're going to wind up winning here. So go ahead and get the bats that you think you need into your lineup. I think there's enough pitching where, you can take chances and go with a guy who may not be the top owned option on the day, but is still in a pretty good spot. Because like I said, if I'm making a case, there's 18 pitchers on the mound, probably 9 or 10 of these guys are guys that I can make a case for starting tonight. So, that's kind of the way that I see it. Thank you guys for joining us here at rotocurve.com for our Benny's Bats edition. And as always, stay classy, DFS.